Welcome back. It's Minerva and Jank. We're getting ready to watch episode 2 of the Mayfair Witches. Okay, so we are set up a little bit different this time because our camera had some malfunctioning and chopped off half of my head.
The audio was not great either, so we'll show you a little bit of that during our discussion, but just so you know, we've already seen it once, and we're going to watch it again and talk about it a bit.
I had mentioned that I thought that this might be one of the, or a replacement for one of the guys that she was supposed to get pregnant by.
So there wasn't a scene in the book where she jerked off a random guy in the woods?
Not that I can recall.
What'd you think
I
about
don't
the
know.
eyes of Sauron watching her?
Again, it's got a little bit of a Lord of the
Or
Rings feel to
the
it.
eyes of Saruman. The crows. I thought it was funny that they had the crows watching, and like later on, they had the crows shitting on Rowan's car, and then her killing the crows. And it was almost like she was taking revenge for them spying on her mom.
Yeah.
Damn voyeuristic crows! I'll show you. I totally called the whole. Like, I don't remember
1995
Yeah,
thing.
I don't remember in the book if this was like a plot point where she lied to her about the adoption agency and they were actually not open until later, but it couldn't have been the same dates. Like, as soon as she said, what did she say? It was like sometime in the 80s that she was adopted, and I was like, oh, we weren't open
It
until
was
1995, and then 3 seconds later or whatever, she said 1995.
The release of my records about my adoption back in 1991.
1991?
Yes, it was a closed adoption.
Not at this agency, it wasn't.
What?
You weren't around until 1995.
You mean I can see my records?
What I mean is that we weren't facilitating adoptions in 1991. Our agency didn't open until 1995.
It's not.
I could write the shit.
But there's no way that
91
that's
is when she was born. No.
there's no way that that's what it was in the book, because
No. Yeah, there
the book
wasn't.
takes place earlier.
With her talking to the therapist here, this is like an interesting twist on like her power a little bit, because in the book it does kind of allude to almost like her being able to kind of like read people's thoughts or have like a very
Well, in the book, can't she read people's thoughts a bit? Doesn't she? Because I know some of the witches, and like some of the people from Talamasca have psychic powers. They can read minds to different extents.
Yeah, there there was some allusion to that a little bit, and she did kind of learn to hone that in a little bit better than like after all that stuff. Going back to the therapist though, that is kind of like something that's new in the show, that there isn't like a reference that I can remember anyways in the story of her like partially giving somebody an aneurysm or
Yeah,
something
and
like
like I
that.
wonder if that doctor recovered, or if she ends up dying later, and maybe we'll find out about that in the next episode. And did the crows shit on her car, and did she kill them in the book? I don't remember that being a thing either.
No, no. I don't remember anything with like
Burying a
animals or
crow on
anything
the
like that.
beach in a shallow grave? What the hell is that about?
Why is she taking this bird to the beach?
I don't know. I don't know why she's putting this much effort into this.
Why did you take it home? Oh, you're gonna bury it? What the
I
fuck?
don't know. Going out of her mind, very anxious, very paranoid, just like
What did that accomplish?
I don't understand.
Now you're gonna take some sleeping pills? You gonna pass out on the beach next to your...
This far out there, burying crows in sand and sleeping on a beach and waking up at a rave.
She is gonna pass out on the beach next to this bird in a shallow grave.
I was surprised that when Green got hurt, she didn't stay in the ambulance with him even before she saw that picture. Like, I was expecting her to go to the hospital with him, and then she gets out and sees the picture, and then he's gone before she can get to the ambulance.
Well, I think for the TV though, because she used his face to unlock the phone, so I think she wanted to go through his phone without anybody knowing that that's what she was doing.
Yeah, I guess.
But the
But you
one
think,
thing
like, she's a doctor that found a stranger on a beach that she's helping. You think that it would be warranted for the doctor to go through the phone just to get, like, an emergency contact or something like that?
yeah, they probably could have
I feel
played
like
this out a little
she
different.
would have felt like she had enough excuse to be looking at the dude's phone in the moment.
The other thing that really stood out to me about this particular scene, though, is because again, Mr. Green is supposed to be a combination of Michael Curry and Aaron Leitner. So Michael Curry had the whole glove thing, touching things, visions, yada yada. But when they touched hands, his glove was still on, and he like had a vision or something happened with him, but his glove was still on. So
Yeah,
like
it seemed like he just had a reaction to touching her, like, whether it was, like, her hurting him involuntarily just because her body reacted to touching him, and or maybe his just reacted to touching her, and the memory of what she had done before. Like, just because he gets, whenever he touches something, he sees, like, what's happened with that in the past or whatever. So maybe just touching her and the experience of her doing that to so many people just had that effect on him, whether it was her doing it or just whether that was his own power doing it to him. I'm not sure.
yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's a really interesting perspective on that.
Because I don't think that that would have happened if it was just another person coming up and touching her. I think it was specifically that he had that power was the reason why that happened. And I know, like you were saying that, well, it doesn't happen that way in the book with the glove, but I kind of feel like it's okay that they changed that. I'm not mad at that because I feel like, you saw that he had to take off the glove to use his power before, but I feel like, like she is such a powerful force that him touching her even with the glove on, he gets a reaction, like says a lot, especially like visually. You see him touch her with the glove and something happens, and you saw him take the glove off before something would happen before. Like they've given us an instance. They did that on purpose.
Yeah.
That wasn't a mistake. That oops, he had the glove on when he touched her and something still happened. They did that on purpose. The whole sex scene between old Deidre, and Lasher, and the psychic force dyad that they have, Kylo Ray style, where they're sharing their orgasm on the plane, was just something else, and obviously something that never happened in the book because Lasher didn't visit Rowan until after Deidre was dead. So we didn't get any special mother daughter bonding time like we get in the show. And I think that was probably a good thing. I don't know why they decided to add that to the show, other than to just get some more of Deidre panting and moaning on screen, and along with Rowan now too. More Rowan and Deidre lusting, I think, is the only reason that we got this on screen. I can't see any other reason.
Now, the Rowan scene part of this, like if you take out Deirdre and Lasher in this particular part, that airplane scene did happen in the book though, and at that point, you're right. Like Deirdre was already dead. She knew she was dead. She was on her way to New Orleans, and then that happened in the plane.
So we're getting a similar scene in the TV show, only Deidre was already dead, and if Lasher would have been having sex with her, it would have been necrophilia at this point. So the first time we saw Deidre have sex with Lasher, you thought she looked a little bit too old.
Well, Maybe it's better that they don't insinuate that it's a 14-year-old getting pregnant and show that sex.
Well, I mean, there I don't think he's trying to get her pregnant again right now.
I imagine she's not supposed to be 14 younger in the story
innocence.
the way the last scene just played out.
I hear you.
Where Deirdre is getting up and walking and communicating with people. I thought that was a really neat piece to add to the television series, considering everything else that they're putting in here, because we never really got to see that from Deirdre. Deirdre was just catatonic and then died.
I thought the part with Deidre actually getting up and going outside with the petals falling on her and everything was shot well. I thought that was a nice scene that we didn't get in the book yet. So in the scene where she goes into the hotel near the end, I didn't realize this the first time we were watching it, but that's Carlotta that's behind her. That why Deidre runs into her in the same hotel, and you see Rowan kind of like shift a couple times and look back behind her at Carlotta. I think she's like feeling her presence, like she and I think that's described in the book, like they can feel other strong witches when they're nearby and like know that there's something going on with this person. And I think Carlotta just being in the same room and that close proximity with her was like giving her a weird vibe, and you see her like turn around and look behind her a couple times in Carlotta's direction.
Yeah, that I didn't pick up on that either. That is really interesting.
And we were more
And
focused on her conversation with the person at the desk and the fact that he said doctor to her in a weird way or whatever, and I didn't even notice that was Carlotta behind her.
like I know that Anne Rice had like darker hair, and so that doesn't match, but just some facial features, and I don't know, or maybe that's just kind of like what I picture Anne Rice would like talk like, and I don't know.
You just picture Anne Rice being an old kooky tour guide of New Orleans.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, I
like
guess.
that's what she did as a hobby in her free time. Like when she wasn't writing, she would take her afternoons and do tour guides in New Orleans.
I mean, she kind of was a tour guide in the way of descriptive writing a little bit.
I guess so. I did like the scene that we got with Lasher when Deidre uses him to find Rowan and like uses him as an actual familiar and sees through his eyes and everything. I know a few of the witches did that in the book. I don't remember if we got a scene where Deidre actually did it. I know we didn't. She didn't get to use him later on in her life like she is in the show now, but I did like that we got to actually see that process play out. And I thought that the effect with the eyes was an okay way of showing that, like that her eyes went white or rolled back in her head, and Lasher's eyes looked the same way. You kind of instantly got the idea of what was going on.
Yeah, I don't think this quite matched up to the way they did the book, but it did feel very much like kind of a witchy kind of thing. I guess in the book, aside from thoughts and reading people's thoughts and then Rowan's kind of power, um, I don't really remember seeing too many like witch powers, them really talking about those a lot.
Well, I think the witch powers are just psychic powers, the same that people in the Talamasca have, like the power to read minds, the power to see and hear spirits, um, other things like that. So, like, I would say that the range of powers is the same as any human with supernatural abilities in Anne Rice's world. It's just that this family calls themselves witches. And in the book, I think it was more like they just told him to do stuff and he went and did it and came back and reported to them. But I kind of like the scene that we got in the show with her actually being able to see through his eyes and stuff. Obviously, in the book, I think that, Lasher has a will of his own that he can choose to disobey the witches, but I'm wondering if in that scene he was able to disobey or not. In the TV show, I feel like they might have more control over him.
I'm not sure what that whole poetic if a man's lost and another man's lost, they can be lost together thing was. But I mean, I definitely think that that was something added in for the TV series
I
specifically.
feel like that was a conversation between Aaron and Michael more than it
Yes.
was a conversation between a Talamasca person and Rowan.
Yes, it very much did feel like it belonged between the two of them,
Because
which is interesting because this is the same character in this.
more
So
than Rowan, I feel like Michael was really lost when he was found by Aaron and he was still, like drunk all the time and just his powers were too much for him. And I feel like that's like something that Aaron would have said to Michael.
they did kind of allude to one of Lasher's kind of trademarks with the family. In the book, they a few times talk about flowers and how he would. There were these beautiful, just gorgeous flowers that looked just super real almost because he would change like the cellular chemistry of them, and they kind of alluded to that in that mural of the or the painting of the
Yeah, the
flowers on the
flowers
wall, and
on
I
the
thought that was
wall
a nice
changed. Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was a nice little touch. And also doing that alongside of Carlotta having a moment where she's almost like losing control and because Deirdre's obviously not under her control anymore. So kind of just really showing more how Lasher's like gaining more control over the situation as it unfolds. It was kind of a nice touch, actually.
Okay. We have to talk about this elevator scene because we've both seen it multiple times now, and I am still confused as to what happens here. Rowan is waiting for the elevator. Deidre gets on, goes up to the 11th floor, whatever, where Rowan's at. The door opens up, they see each other, and then Deidre's neck just opens up as if she was cut, but there was nobody there to cut her. There was no blade, there was no nothing. Like maybe we'll get a shot later on where you see she was cut just before the door opens, but there was no line or anything there, and then her neck just opens up and just blood comes pouring up, and you can see it's not just that there was a cut there, but there's this like gaping hole. There's this gaping like there was a wedge taken out of her neck, and like it goes all the way to the back of the neck almost, or like halfway through or whatever. It's not just like a slit. It's like there's a piece of her neck just missing almost. Or like it's tilted back like far, like you can see how deep the cut is. A very, very deep cut. And I don't know what could have caused that. I don't think that Lasher is capable of doing that. We didn't see anybody in the elevator with her. So and it's not explained at all. Like I wouldn't call that a cliffhanger as much as a fuck you to anybody watching the show.
What happened though?
Now she's gonna think that she killed her mom.
You gave the first episode a 6.5 out of 10, I think. 6.5, 7, you said the first time.
I don't know. This is dumb.
What do you give this one?
I think for plotline in comparison to what I would like to have seen with the book, of course, I'd have to give it like a 3. I think they did a good job of alluding to some stuff that was in the book, like the airplane scene, the flowers on the wall. But I mean, obviously, it didn't follow that plot line. But I will say that as a follow up to the first episode and kind of where they left it, although I don't like that Deirdre was alive and that her and Rowan actually met. I think progression of their storyline, they didn't do too bad. So I think I'd probably give it like a 5.
You went from a 3 to a 5?
Just from a perspective of like say I hadn't read the book or I wasn't like that tied to what the book and that storyline was, I would say this would be a 5. There's some things that just don't like the bird scene and her burying the birds on the beach was just really fucked up.
I thought that I've been a harder critic than you on this show, and I was gonna say 4. I think, and then when you said 3, that kind of felt more right to me because honestly, I'm trying to think of like things that I liked about this episode, and there was a lot more that I liked about the first episode, and there was at least just as many things that I had a problem with in this episode without all the good stuff that I found in the first episode. So I definitely feel like it would not get as high of a score for me as the first episode did, but my first reaction was a 4. I thought maybe I was just being generous because I didn't want to be too harsh on this show, but I don't know. I think maybe that's right around the mark. I know you were hovering between a 3 and a 5, and maybe a 4 is right where it belongs. So, any thoughts on what's going to happen next week, or any predictions, anything like that?
I think that this next episode is probably just going to focus a little bit on her getting connected to some other members of the family, um, as she kind of tries to find out, first of all, what happened with her mom now, but find out about her. I think we'll see a little bit more of the Talamasca connection to like the mother house.
It's funny you mentioned the mother house because we haven't heard it referred to that way at all, or really got much backstory on the Talamasca as an organization at all. I wonder, and I kind of am hoping for an episode that's dedicated to the Talamasca and their origins and kind of like their viewpoint. Like if we are gonna get like a backstory on the different generations of the witches and kind of like what you were hoping for, like episodes on the different heirs of the witch family. I kind of hope it's from the view of the Talamasca, like through the lens of the Talamasca, and then we also get to learn about them while we're learning about the family.
We might see a funeral in this next episode with Deirdre actually being dead now. And maybe that's how we'll have some of those connections, which would be cool because that is how that happened in the book. That's how
Yeah,
she got
well,
connected to a lot of them.
we'll probably get the funeral scene from the book, except that it's ruined now because Deidre got to see her mom before she died. Like, obviously, she didn't get to find out much, but I feel like the whole funeral scene of her coming in there with no knowledge of anything and walking, like, she wasn't going to find her mother and reconnect with her alive mother when she got there to New Orleans. There wasn't this hope. She was walking into the memory of her mother and what was and piecing this together. And I feel like that's a much different feel than we got of Rowan walking into New Orleans there. And subsequently, any shots that we're going to get from the funeral are just not going to be the same as they were in the book.
However, I do think that they could have taken it a lot further than they did. Like they could have actually had legit interaction between Deirdre and Rowan, and they didn't. So I still think you could pull off a a close funeral scene that still feels a lot like the book because she doesn't know anything about her mom other than what she looks like. And if she went to the funeral after she was dead, she would know what she looks like because she would see her in the casket. Now, granted, she's going to know what she looks like before she sees her in the casket, but
Like, okay,
she still
so
doesn't know her.
So we can get like some of the same scenes, maybe even the same conversation that she had, like small talk that she has with people at the funeral or whatever, talk about her mom and stuff. But I just mean that I feel like the whole experience, like that whole chapter or whatever from the book, is so much different than what we got here because in the book, she finds out her mom is dead, and then she has to go to New Orleans, and like I was saying, it's just such a whole different world and experience than what she was used to. And everything new that she's experienced with New Orleans, is putting together with her dead mother. She's equating that to her dead mother. Whereas in the show, she comes to New Orleans, filled with hope and on this hunt for her mother, who she finds, shortly after she gets there. So I don't feel like her landing in New Orleans and, it's her first day or whatever spent in New Orleans feels anything like it does in the books. And I feel like in the book, all that, you really felt the impact of all that. Just her, from her first step into the city to that small talk at the funeral, was like one experience for her that was really like, slowly everything was setting in for her. And it's not going to be the same way in the show.
Yeah, plus this obviously adds an element of anxiety, and I'm sure a lot of overthinking and stuff too, because now she's, witnessed her mother's death in the TV series, where in the books she didn't have that. And she kind of had to find out about like her mother's state that she was in before all of this happened, and learning from Carlotta about like why she was set up the way she was, where here you're not going to necessarily get that exact same feel because she watched her die.
That's another thing. Rowan's got to have a lot of questions in the show that she didn't have in the book, because it's one thing to be told that your dead mother was catatonic on a porch for years. It's another thing to see her all of a sudden standing on an elevator by herself, obviously recognize you. And I think she might have said, did she say like it's you back to her or whatever? But she didn't seem like an invalid on the porch. And then you're going to tell me that this woman whose neck just fell apart in front of me was also like, has been sitting on a porch and hasn't said a word or walked or anything in the last 30 years or whatever. Like, that presents some problems that weren't there in the book. It's gonna be a little weird, be like, well, that's the first time she's got up out of her chair in 20 years or whatever, like, how do you
But
explain?
here she's wearing this beautiful dress and is
And she was
on an
loose,
elevator as walk downtown.
and there was plenty of people, witnesses, talking to her. She was completely lucid that day.
It's just really interesting to see some of the things that they're keeping in, that they're taking out and replacing.
Do you think that Deidre's neck exploded because nobody commented on the last video? What do you have to say to all those motherfuckers who didn't comment?
Yeah, leave a comment this time, or another bird's gonna die.
I'm just gonna put the clip of them hitting the car.